Hey everyone, it's Anthony, co-founder and CEO of Before Grad. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about mobile advertising and the big difference between mobile advertising today versus even just 3 or 5 or 7 years ago. One of the key things that I've realized is machine learning is totally changing advertising. The whole marketing industry has already been revolutionized by machine learning, with the ability for code to essentially learn best practices through data, right? And so marketing is this industry is ripe for innovation because of the fact that there's so much data that's being consumed, there's so much analytics. And so the question becomes, how do you take advantage of this? Well, platforms like Facebook and Google and many of the DSPs out there have actually decided, well, why don't we just take this data and create an algorithm, machine learning algorithms, that will actually digest this data and try to find your best potential users, the users that spend the most money in your product, the users that will use your product for the longest period of time. And this is something that's totally revolutionized business itself, right? But in the context of mobile apps, I think it's affected things even greater than even an e-commerce business, for instance, and especially more than a brick and mortar store. And the reason why is because mobile marketing is truly at its essence about paid advertising, right? You have other silos. You want to be able to get organic traffic from the App Store. You want referrals and word of mouth. You want to be featured in the media. You want public relations. You want to stay in touch with your users with newsletters and transactional emails. But the reality is it all sort of comes from paid advertising, because paid advertising is what gets your brand out there. It's what attracts your initial users. When you don't have a presence on the App Store and when you don't have other attention from media and whatnot. And so the question becomes, okay, how can you take advantage of this big revolution in marketing, which is machine learning, right? Because this is really the only industry where machine learning has been applied and it's actually made a huge difference. And so what I tell entrepreneurs and investors is that you want to actually understand what channel works best for you, right? So first and foremost, there's Facebook ads. Facebook is probably the best option if you are new to mobile marketing, and it's also the one that will probably consume the most money out of all of the names I mentioned. And the reason why is because they just have such a huge audience and they actually have the most data, arguably, compared to other companies on their users. And so naturally, they will find the most people that are willing to spend the most money on your product. The thing is that with that being said, you actually have to set up Facebook the right way. And I can make another video talking about the Power 5 strategy and different things you can do specific to Facebook, right? But that's the best channel to start with. If you have a mobile app on the App Store, you want to start with Facebook ads. And Facebook is also the best place to actually test your creative. So if you are looking to try to figure out the best, the creative that resonates best with your audience, what gets the best click-through rate, the best install rate, Facebook is probably the quickest at getting those results because of the way the algorithms work and how they, when you run an ad set, a campaign for the first time on Facebook, it will actually try to test your creative among as many audiences as possible. So what's happening is it collects that data very quickly. All right, so there's Facebook, right? And then there's Google, and specifically Google UAC, right? So Google UAC is actually their universal app campaigns. And if you have an app on iOS or Android, this is the campaign type that you would use on Google Ads to basically scale your creatives and reach your audience. Again, machine learning is very essential here. In fact, I would argue Google UAC relies on machine learning even more than Facebook, because you can't even really specify an audience. You can specify an age range, but that's about it. You can't, and a country, but you can't really go beyond that, which is pretty incredible, right? So the rest is all automatic. In fact, they can even automatically create your ads for you. But I recommend that you create, you test those creatives on Facebook, and then the ones that succeed, that perform best, you bring over to Google. What's interesting about Google UAC, relative to these other ad platforms, is that you really need to have a certain level of ad spend before you see great results, right? With Facebook, you could spend as little as $5, $10 a day on ads if you're literally getting started on it for the first time, Google UAC, I would recommend, at least 100, 200, maybe even 300 a day if you're just getting started. And so I would recommend Google UAC as a best sort of second option, right? If you're looking to differentiate your media channels, if you want to reach users outside of the Facebook platforms like Facebook.com and Instagram, then Google is probably your next best bet. But again, you need a certain level of ad spend for those machine learning algorithms to really hook in and find that audience. Because again, you can't tell it as much as Facebook. You can't provide a specific detailed sort of targeting that you can on Facebook. Google UAC just it's sort of like a self-driving car. It just kind of does its own thing, and you just have to, just trust it. And that's really the direction Google is going in when it comes to marketing, is totally taking control away from the marketer and doing everything for you. All right, so I covered Facebook, I covered Google UAC, and those are in terms of marketing, those are kind of seen as a duopoly, right? They probably access, upwards of 50% of the market. With that being said, that is changing, and there are many other ad networks that are not the same size as Facebook or Google, but they're called DSPs. And the idea is that they actually hook into multiple ad networks, sometimes ones like Google, but sometimes also many of these smaller players you never hear about. And they actually work with all of these ad exchanges and serve your ads to all of these networks simultaneously, right? And one of the advantages with that is you get more competitive bidding because you naturally can bid for inventory, ad inventory that is lower cost relative to, for instance, the inventory offered by Facebook or Google, which is considered premium inventory and often a little more expensive, right? So when it comes to DSPs, especially in the mobile space, and that's something important to point out, is that there are many types of DSPs. If you want to target an audience specifically in the United States that runs iOS, and maybe you want to target gamers, there's probably a DSP out there that's specific for you, right? Maybe IronSource or AppLovin, right? And sometimes they have their own network as well that you can hook into, but then you can hook into other networks that they've partnered with. The idea is that you want to actually pick a DSP that fits best for you. If your audience is in China, for instance, there's DSPs specific to that audience, right? Working with the ad networks in China. If there's ad networks in Europe that you really want to focus on, oftentimes those overlap with the US, but there's some that are exclusive, for instance, to Eastern Europe. So again, you want to actually look at a DSP that fits for you. The other thing worth mentioning is that DSPs also require a lot more minimum ad spend than, say, a Google or a Facebook, right? So in the case of a DSP like Liftoff or IronSource, you generally need somewhere between $100 to $300 a day US in daily spend to even be able to run ads on those networks, on those DSPs. And then on top of that, there might be some other costs, like for instance, they use machine learning, but their machine learning might require more time to learn because they don't have the same data Facebook has or Google has, right? And these are often the ads that you see served in mobile games, for instance. So if you look at the top, the top games on the App Store, oftentimes they use ads, right? And they're not afraid to do that, right? You sometimes see like 5 ads in the course of 2 minutes. And the reality is that these are often served by DSPs because the publisher of these games actually get the best bidding, right? Essentially the best CPM, the cost per 1,000 impressions, relative to if they just use a single ad network. Right? So if they just used Facebook ads or Google ads to serve their customers, they wouldn't make as much money from those ads. But because they basically give it to the highest bidder, what happens is DSPs come in handy because essentially you unlock that inventory, right? You can set the bids, you can control everything very specifically in terms of targeting. So yeah, these are, and again, machine learning connects into DSPs. There's some DSPs that are more about manual control, but overall, generally speaking, they all use some type of machine learning. And so you want to basically play around with these platforms, pick one that works best for you once you're at that stage. And again, it unlocks a whole treasure trove of new users. And that's really the name of the game, right? So thank you, everybody. I'm grateful that you've taken the time to watch this video, and I'm going to answer any other questions you guys might have in future videos. Thank you very much.